The clink of crystal glasses and low hum of conversation filled Pendleton's, the kind of polished restaurant where the air itself seemed to shimmer with quiet wealth. Maya balanced a tray of champagne flutes on her palm, her focus fixed on the polished marble floor, the rhythm of service her only shield. She turned toward table 12 and froze. There, framed in the warm light beneath a pendant chandelier, sat Adrian Blackwell, the boy who had once sworn he would never let go, now a man in a tailored charcoal suit, leaning slightly toward a circle of executives and investors. 12 years vanished in a heartbeat. His hair was shorter, darker, but the way he rested his hand on the stem of his glass, deliberate, steady, was unchanged. A scar she had never seen traced a pale line near his temple, a new mark on a familiar face. Her breath caught, tray trembling. Selma, the shift manager, brushed past and murmured a reminder about the VIP order. Maya nodded too quickly, trying to hide the shake in her hands. She forced her steps forward, each one heavier than the last, and set the flutes down on crisp linen. Laughter rippled around the table. Adrian did not look up, or perhaps he was pretending not to. She retreated to the service station, heat rising behind her eyes. In the reflection of a silver dome cover, she saw her own face, older, lined with exhaustion, a loose strand of hair escaping the knot at her neck. Behind that reflection, across the dining room, the man she had loved once existed like a memory given flesh. When she returned with the entree plates, he turned. Just slightly, their eyes met. Recognition flashed, quick, sharp as lightning, before his expression smoothed into polite neutrality. He thanked her by name. Maya. 2 syllables spoken as if he were tasting them again after years in exile. The name hit her like a chord plucked from an old song. She managed a professional nod, murmured a rehearsed "enjoy your meal," and stepped back. Her pulse hammered in her throat. Did he truly remember? Or was he reading the name from the small brass tag pinned above her heart? Victor Sterling, the silver-haired investor beside him, raised a toast about legacies and new beginnings. Adrian smiled, a subtle, composed curve of his lips that once would have made her laugh. Now it only hollowed her chest. She turned away before he could glance back. In the kitchen's fluorescent light, she set the tray down with a metallic clatter. Marco, the head chef, shot her a look. She muttered an apology, wiped her hands, and leaned against the counter. 12 years since the letter that never came. Since the summer he vanished without explanation, leaving her with unanswered calls and a ring that no longer fit. Selma appeared again, holding a folded note. "Table 12, she whispered. Maya unfolded the thick cardstock with trembling fingers. A single business card rested inside. Blackwell Architectural Innovations. And beneath it, a line in his handwriting, spare and unmistakable. "There are promises I still intend to keep." The words swam before her eyes. She slid the card into her apron pocket and inhaled the scent of rosemary and smoke drifting from the line. The rest of the shift passed in fragments, orders recited by rote, tables cleared automatically. Every glimpse of his table tugged her attention like a magnet. By the time the final check was signed, the room had thinned to murmurs and candlelight. Adrian stood near the entrance, coat draped over his arm, eyes searching. For a heartbeat, they held each other's gaze across the space, 2 ghosts caught between past and present. Then he nodded once, a gesture both invitation and farewell, and stepped through the revolving door into the rain-slick street. Maya exhaled a breath she hadn't known she'd been holding. The card in her pocket burned against her skin, a silent question she wasn't ready to answer. Around her, the staff reset tables for the next day, polishing glass until it gleamed like memory. She gathered her things, checked the clock, midnight, and slipped out the back exit into the cool night, the city lights blurring behind tears she refused to shed. Morning light seeped through the thin curtains of the small apartment, catching on the worn edges of recipe cards scattered across the counter. Maya stirred sugar into her coffee, watching it dissolve like the remnants of a dream. The city outside was already awake, horns blaring, footsteps echoing in the hallway. She tied her apron over a faded blouse, the same uniform that carried her through double shifts and sleepless nights. In the adjoining room, the quiet beep of a monitor broke the silence. Ruth stirred on the recliner, her breath shallow but steady. The scent of antiseptic mingled with lavender oil that Maya used to soften the hospital tang. She approached, adjusting the blanket around her mother's shoulders, whispering a greeting that barely hid her exhaustion. Ruth opened her eyes, pale but alert, and reached for her daughter's hand. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked softly. Maya smiled with practiced ease and said she had, though the circles under her eyes betrayed the lie. Bills were stacked in a neat row beside the chair, envelopes marked in red and blue. She turned them face down before her mother could see. The memory of last night hovered like smoke. Adrian's face across the dining room, his voice saying her name. The card in her apron pocket now lay on the counter beside the coffee mug. She traced the embossed letters with a fingertip, feeling the weight of all the unasked questions. 12 years had passed, yet a single glance had pulled the ground from beneath her. She tucked the card into a drawer and shut it with finality. Promises meant little when rent was due and medication wasn't covered by insurance. She filled a pitcher of water, set out her mother's pills, and read aloud the schedule taped to the fridge. Ruth listened, nodding, her eyes filled with both gratitude and sorrow. "You always wanted the bakery," Ruth murmured. "The smell of cinnamon rolls in the morning." Maya smiled faintly. Dreams cost more than sugar and flour these days. Besides, someone has to keep the lights on. Ruth squeezed her hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Don't bury yourself alive just because life got heavy. Promise me you won't let the past decide everything." Maya promised because it was easier than explaining the ache that never truly left. She finished tidying the small kitchen, gathering her bag with its frayed strap and the notebook of recipes she still carried like a talisman. Before leaving, she kissed her mother's forehead and whispered she would be home before dusk. The bus ride to Pendleton's was crowded and gray, filled with commuters staring into screens. Maya rested her forehead against the window, watching reflections slide across glass towers she would never enter. Somewhere in one of those offices, Adrian lived a life of influence, far removed from the girl he left behind. She tried to imagine confronting him, asking why, but the thought made her chest tighten. Some wounds were easier to hide behind polite smiles. At the staff entrance, she exchanged nods with coworkers, blending into the rhythm of preparation. The kitchen buzzed with early deliveries, trays clattering, voices calling orders. Selma handed her the schedule for the week, another string of double shifts. Maya signed without complaint. Stability meant survival. Between tasks, she scribbled notes for a new recipe in the margin of an old order sheet, a fleeting act of rebellion. Cinnamon pear scones, honey glaze, a touch of lemon zest. She could almost smell them baking, golden and warm, the scent filling a space she might call her own one day. Then the bell chimed for service, and the vision vanished into steam. When lunchtime rushed in, Maya moved like clockwork, balancing plates, exchanging pleasantries, collecting empty glasses. Every so often her eyes drifted to the corner booth where Adrian had sat, now occupied by strangers. Relief mingled with disappointment. The absence felt louder than his presence had. After the final table cleared, she took a brief break in the alley behind the restaurant, leaning against the brick wall. The autumn wind carried the faint sweetness of roasted chestnuts from a vendor down the street. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply, letting herself believe for one heartbeat that life could still change course. Her phone buzzed with a reminder from the pharmacy, followed by a message from the landlord about the overdue utility fee. The fragile calm shattered. She tucked the phone away and straightened, adjusting her apron. The world allowed little room for sentiment. Love had left her once, bills never did. As evening approached, she finished her shift, counting tips with mechanical precision. Enough for groceries, not enough for dreams. She clocked out and stepped into the cooling air, the city lights flickering like distant promises. Somewhere behind those lights was a man who claimed there were debts of the heart still unpaid. Maya pulled her coat tighter and walked toward the bus stop, each step measured, each breath a quiet vow to keep moving, no matter what ghosts stirred in the dark. Lunch hour swelled inside Pendleton's, with the noise of clinking cutlery and layered conversations that rose and fell like ocean waves. Maya moved through it all with practiced grace, tray balanced effortlessly on her palm, smile set firmly in place. The rhythm of service was her armor. Orders called out, plates delivered, gratitude exchanged with a nod. She had mastered the art of invisibility, of existing within the din without truly being seen. But as she approached the private dining alcove near the windows, that fragile shield trembled. A reservation under Sterling, high-profile clients. Selma's warning echoed in her ear. Be precise, be composed, this table matters. Maya stepped forward, heart steady until she caught the timbre of a voice that cut through the hum like a memory. Measured, calm, deep enough to pull her 12 years backward. She slowed, breath catching as her eyes found the source. Adrian sat at the head of the table, posture relaxed yet commanding, surrounded by architects, investors, and journalists with sleek devices poised for notes. A presentation spread across a tablet, showing blueprints of a new urban redevelopment. His hand gestured toward the image, rings of conversation orbiting him like planets. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, illuminating a faint silver thread in his dark hair. He looked older, sharper, carved by responsibility, but when he turned slightly and his gaze brushed the servers nearby, Maya felt the room contract around her. She forced her eyes down, pretending to adjust the tray. The clatter of a falling fork somewhere behind startled her, but the noise faded under the pounding in her ears. Selma nudged her gently forward. "Table 12, she whispered. She stepped into the alcove, her voice held steady as she recited the specials. Pan-seared salmon with citrus glaze, roasted squash soup, artisan bread baked in-house. The words emerged like lines from a script learned by heart, detached from thought. Yet each syllable vibrated with an undertow of trembling. When she set the plates before the guests, Adrian's gaze lifted at last. Their eyes met across the white linen. Recognition flickered, brief as the flare of a match. His brows shifted, a fraction of surprise, then control returned. He thanked her, tone polite, neutral. Maya. Her name in his voice again, soft, deliberate, carrying echoes of 1,000 moments lost to silence. She inclined her head, forcing the corners of her lips upward, and turned away before her expression betrayed her. The distance between table and kitchen stretched like a corridor through time. She reached the service door and exhaled a breath that trembled against her palms. Inside the kitchen's noise, she clung to the routine. Refill the pitchers, check the dessert orders, avoid the urge to look back. But every motion was haunted by the echo of her name. Did he remember the night at the lake, the sketches on napkins, the promise whispered under falling stars? Or was his courtesy nothing more than habit toward a stranger sharing a familiar name? A bell chimed for pickup. She lifted the tray, steadied her shaking wrist, and returned to the floor. At the alcove, laughter rippled among the guests as Victor Sterling praised Adrian's vision for transforming derelict blocks into homes for families priced out of the city. Adrian listened, nodding, though his eyes drifted toward the reflection in the glass, the faint outline of Maya passing behind him. She caught fragments of their conversation. Talk of community investment, sustainable design, legacy. The words pricked at her with a cruel irony. He built legacies now, while she scraped together enough to keep the lights on. Once, they had dreamed together of a small bakery near the river, morning air thick with cinnamon. That dream had faded with the echo of unanswered calls. The meeting wound down with handshakes and murmured farewells. Maya approached to clear the table, movements precise despite the heaviness in her chest. As she gathered glasses, Adrian rose, smoothing the lapel of his suit. For a moment he stood beside her, close enough that she caught the faint scent of cedar and rain. "Thank you for your service," he said quietly. His voice carried a weight unspoken. Then he reached into his jacket, drew out a business card, and placed it on the folded napkin. Their fingers did not touch, but the air between them felt charged. He hesitated as if to speak further, then inclined his head and walked away with his entourage. Maya stared at the card, the embossed letters gleaming faintly. Blackwell Architectural Innovations. Beneath, a line in ink, an invitation or a reminder, left for her to interpret. She slipped it into her apron, heart hammering against her ribs, unsure whether the tremor inside her was fear, longing, or the stirring of something that refused to stay buried. Back in the kitchen, she set down the tray and pressed a hand to her chest. The world around her spun on, oblivious, while the past she thought she had mastered whispered from a single glance that nothing was finished yet. Night cloaked the city in amber light and drizzle as Maya left the restaurant, exhaustion pressing against her shoulders like a weight she could not set down. The streets shimmered with reflections from passing cars, and the chill carried the faint scent of rain-soaked pavement. She clutched her coat tighter, her fingers brushing the outline of the business card in her pocket. Each step home echoed with questions she had tried to silence all day. In the apartment, the dim lamp cast a warm pool over the small table where Ruth sat with a book unopened on her lap. She looked up as the door creaked, her eyes bright with quiet concern. "You're late again," she said gently. Maya managed a weary smile and set her bag down. "Busy shift," she murmured. Then, before she could stop herself, she drew out the card and placed it on the table. Ruth adjusted her glasses, reading the embossed name, her expression sharpening. "Adrian Blackwell," she repeated slowly, tasting the memory. The name seemed to stir something behind her eyes. He was the boy from the summer by the lake, wasn't he? The one who promised to build you a bakery. Maya nodded, sinking into the chair across from her mother. He came to the restaurant. 12 years and he just appeared, left this, said there were promises he still meant to keep. Ruth set the card down carefully, as if it carried heat. "People like him live in worlds built on deals, not feelings," she said softly. "You've built your own life since then. Be sure he doesn't rewrite it for you." Maya stared at the polished surface of the card, its simplicity both elegant and unsettling. "I don't know what he wants," she whispered, "but part of me needs to hear it just once from his own mouth, why he left, why he never said goodbye." The room filled with the low hum of the heater, the sound of rain against the window. Ruth reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. "Closure can be a door or a trap, Maya. Sometimes peace comes from walking away, not from reopening wounds. But if you go with clear eyes. Do not let nostalgia blind you to what is real now." Maya nodded, though clarity felt as distant as the stars beyond the clouds. She brewed tea, the steam rising like ghostly tendrils, and tried to imagine what tomorrow might bring. The card sat between them, a silent messenger from a life she had buried beneath work and obligation. Later, alone in her room, she opened the drawer that held a small wooden box. Inside lay the promise ring he had given her at 18, a silver band etched with a faint design of vines. She had kept it, despite the pain, unable to throw away the symbol of a future that never came. Holding it now, she felt the ache of all the unanswered questions. Did he regret the silence, or had she simply been a chapter he closed with ease? Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of blueprints and laughter by the lake, of letters she never received. When dawn broke, she rose before the alarm, moving through the morning routine in silence. Ruth watched her with eyes that knew more than they said. "Be careful," was all she murmured, as Maya slipped out the door. The city was waking as Maya walked toward the sleek tower that bore the Blackwell name etched in glass. Her reflection in the window looked small, almost fragile, but beneath the surface a quiet resolve steadied her. She would not be a girl chasing echoes. She would be a woman seeking truth. Inside the lobby, marble floors reflected chandeliers like pools of light. The receptionist greeted her with professional warmth and called upstairs. Moments later, she was escorted into an elevator that rose smoothly through layers of wealth and ambition. As the numbers climbed, so did her heartbeat. She pressed a palm against her coat pocket, feeling the faint imprint of the ring hidden within. The doors opened to a panorama of glass and steel, a view stretching across the skyline. Adrian waited near the window, his posture composed, his gaze distant, until he turned and saw her. For a breath they stood in silence, the weight of years hanging between them. Then he spoke her name, softly, as if testing the sound against the morning air. "Maya, thank you for coming. There's so much I should have said long ago." She met his eyes, steady now despite the tremor beneath her ribs. "Then say it," she replied. "Let's start with why." The city stretched out behind them, vast and indifferent, as the past began to stir to life once more. The office smelled faintly of cedar and paper, a quiet sanctuary above the restless city. Morning light spilled across polished floors and shelves lined with models of buildings, miniature skylines frozen in ambition. Maya stood near the doorway, clutching her purse, every muscle taut with the instinct to retreat. Adrian gestured toward the seating area by the window, where a pot of coffee steamed between two empty cups. She hesitated before stepping closer, her heels silent against the floor. He waited until she sat, then lowered himself across from her, his hands clasped loosely as though he feared that if he moved too quickly, she might vanish again. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the city below filled the space between them. Finally, he drew a slow breath. "I owe you an explanation. 12 years ago, I didn't disappear because I stopped caring. I disappeared because I was forced to." Maya held his gaze, unflinching, forced by what she asked quietly. "By the same man who taught me that love was a liability. My father believed emotion made you weak. When he learned how serious we were, he threatened to cut off your scholarship and expose debts your mother didn't know existed. He wanted me overseas, away from distractions, under his control. So I left, thinking distance would protect you from the storm he could create." His words fell heavy, each one scraping across the silence. Maya stared at him, struggling to reconcile the confession with the years of emptiness that followed. "You could have told me," she said. "We could have found another way." He shook his head. "At 19, I believed silence was mercy. I thought I was saving you from his reach. Instead, I turned you into collateral damage." She folded her hands in her lap, knuckles pale. The memories came unbidden. The unanswered calls, the nights waiting for messages that never came. The bakery sketches he promised to design together. The ring still hidden in her drawer. "Why now, Adrian?" she asked. "Why find me after all this time?" "Because the truth didn't end with our separation," he replied. "The Blackwell Foundation has been funding a trust in your mother's name since before we met. I discovered it last year while auditing old portfolios. It holds assets meant for a small business, your bakery. It was disguised to keep it off the books, part of my father's network of secret investments. I think he used your family to settle an old debt. You deserve to know." Maya's pulse quickened, a trust in her mother's name. It sounded impossible, a cruel twist of fate. "Why tell me instead of handling it quietly?" "Because it belongs to you, and because I need to make things right. Not in secret, not with half measures." He reached into a folder and slid a document across the table. Legal seals, signatures faded by time, her mother's name printed beside unfamiliar corporations. She traced the letters with a trembling finger, a mixture of disbelief and resentment rising in her throat. "If this is real, it's not just an apology," she said. "It's a responsibility." He nodded. "And it's one I'm prepared to help you navigate, on your terms." Maya looked up, eyes searching his face for traces of the boy she once knew. Beneath the polished exterior she glimpsed weariness, perhaps even regret. But trust was not a switch to be flipped. It was a bridge rebuilt stone by stone. "I need proof," she said firmly. "Independent verification, no strings." "You'll have it," he answered. "I've already contacted a public interest lawyer to review everything." The admission surprised her. For the first time that morning, something inside her softened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition that the man before her was trying to meet her where she stood. They sat in silence. The city spread wide beyond the glass, a map of roads that once might have been theirs. Finally, Maya rose, gathering the papers. "I'll look into it, but this doesn't erase the years." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking for absolution. Only a chance to tell the truth and keep the promises I failed before." She walked toward the elevator, the folder pressed to her chest, her reflection ghosted in the glass. Behind her, Adrian remained by the window, a solitary figure framed against the skyline. As the doors closed, Maya whispered to herself the words her mother had taught her. Closure can be a door or a trap. She would decide which before stepping through. The rain returned by evening, soft and steady, painting ripples across the glass walls of the apartment. Maya spread the documents across the small kitchen table, their legal language dense and cold. The trust bore her mother's name in faded ink, tied to accounts she had never heard of. She ran her finger along the embossed seal and felt a strange pulse of anger and curiosity. 12 years of scraping by, counting every dollar, while a hidden fortune sat untouched in some distant ledger. Ruth stirred in the recliner, her breathing roughened by sleep. Maya glanced toward her and then back at the papers. She could almost hear her mother's voice cautioning patience, but the ache of what might have been clawed at her chest. A bakery with sunlight pouring across wooden counters, the smell of cinnamon and yeast rising in the morning air. A dream deferred by sickness and silence. She gathered the pages into a folder and set them aside, unwilling to decide their meaning alone. Sleep eluded her. Near midnight, she opened the drawer that held the wooden box, lifting the promise ring into her palm. The silver caught the light, glimmering like a star drowning in fog. She closed her eyes and the memory unfolded with painful clarity. The lake, the fading dusk, the warmth of his hand, as he promised that distance could never break what they built. That promise dissolved the moment he vanished. Now here he was again, with explanations wrapped in money and guilt. The next day she walked to the riverfront, where the city's skyline mirrored itself in the water. Clouds drifted low, heavy with unspent rain. She sat on a bench beneath a maple tree, the ring turning between her fingers, and wondered if fate was simply another name for unfinished business. Her phone buzzed with a message from the public interest lawyer Adrian had recommended. They confirmed receipt of the documents and promised a full review within a week. The efficiency unsettled her. It meant his intentions, at least in this, might be genuine. Still, sincerity did not erase the years of silence. A shadow fell across the bench. She looked up to see Adrian standing there, hands in his pockets, hair damp from the mist. "I hoped I'd find you here," he said softly. "You remember this place?" she asked. "Every detail, the smell of wet leaves, the sound of the ferry horn. You told me once that water holds memories." She turned back to the river. Maybe it remembers the people who left too. He sat a careful distance away, eyes tracing the ripples. "I can't rewrite what I did, but I can face it. My father's gone now. His empire is mine to rebuild or dismantle. I want to start with honesty." "Honesty would have been a letter 12 years ago," she replied, "not a folder of legal claims." He flinched but nodded. "You're right. I was a coward then. I thought leaving was protection. It was punishment." The wind lifted strands of her hair, carrying the scent of rain between them. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, he reached into his coat and drew out a sketchbook. The pages were worn, edges frayed. He flipped to a drawing of a small bakery, sunlight streaming through wide windows, vines curling around the sign. "I kept designing it," he said quietly. "Every city I lived in, every project I took, I came back to this. It was the one blueprint I never built, because it wasn't mine alone." Maya stared at the lines, at the care etched into each stroke. The drawing stirred both tenderness and fury. She wanted to believe in its sincerity, yet part of her feared it was only another gesture shaped by guilt. "You can't fix the past with sketches and trusts," she whispered. "No," he agreed, "but maybe I can help you build something new. If you'll let me stand beside you, not in front." She closed the book and handed it back. "I need proof, not promises. Let the lawyer finish. Let time show me who you've become." Adrian accepted the book without argument. "When you're ready, I'll be here." As he walked away, his figure blurred by mist, Maya pressed the ring into her palm until it bit against her skin. The ache remained, but beneath it flickered a fragile spark, the possibility that truth, though late, might still carry weight enough to change the shape of tomorrow. Days folded into one another, each marked by quiet anticipation and attention that threaded through the simplest tasks. Maya returned to the restaurant, her movements efficient, her smile measured, but her mind hovered over the documents now resting in the lawyer's hands. The world around her carried on as if nothing had shifted, yet inside, she felt the tremor of change like a fault line waiting to break. When the call finally came, it arrived on a gray afternoon between lunch and dinner service. The lawyer's voice was calm, deliberate, confirming that the trust was legitimate. It had been established decades earlier, tied to old Blackwell holdings and managed through layers of shell corporations. Her mother was indeed listed as beneficiary, though unaware. The assets were untouched, quietly compounding through the years, enough to start the bakery she once dreamed of, without owing anyone a cent. Maya stood in the narrow alley behind Pendleton's, phone pressed to her ear, rain dripping from the awning above. Gratitude warred with disbelief. The funds were real, the ownership clear. Yet the truth carried another weight, her family's name woven into the legacy of a man whose silence had once rewritten her life. That evening she brought the news to Ruth, setting the printed summary on the kitchen table. Her mother's eyes scanned the lines slowly, lips trembling. "So all this time we struggled while money sat idle under someone else's name," she murmured. Maya nodded, unable to find words that could contain both relief and bitterness. Ruth reached for her daughter's hand. "Maybe this is the universe returning what was taken. But remember, child, blessings can bind as much as they free. Take what is yours, but guard your heart." Maya listened, the weight of inheritance pressing against her ribs. She thought of Adrian's face at the river, the sincerity in his voice, the sketchbook still imprinted in her memory. Perhaps he truly meant to make amends, but sincerity did not erase consequence. 2 days later, she met Adrian again, this time in a quiet cafe near the university where she once studied. The smell of roasted beans mingled with soft music and the faint buzz of conversation. He rose when she entered, eyes searching hers for a sign of forgiveness. "It's real," she said simply as she sat. The lawyer confirmed everything. Relief flickered across his features. Then at least truth has somewhere to begin. Maya studied him over the rim of her cup. "You built empires while I counted tips. Can you understand what it means to discover that part of your past was funded by people who left you behind?" His expression tightened. "I can't undo the cost you bore. I can only make sure the future carries a different balance." He slid another envelope across the table. Inside were outlines for transferring full control of the trust, no conditions, no oversight from his company, and a separate document proposing a community foundation named after her mother, dedicated to small business grants for women starting over. Maya's fingers rested on the papers but did not open them. "You seem determined to give away pieces of yourself," she said quietly. "Is this atonement or guilt?" "Perhaps both," he admitted. "But it's also acknowledgement. You taught me once that promises are not words, they are actions repeated until they become truth." His words unsettled her more than comforted. She folded the envelope and returned it to him. "I'll read it later. For now, I need space to think." They parted with polite goodbyes, though the air between them pulsed with unspoken questions. That night, alone in her small kitchen, Maya spread the documents once more across the table. Numbers stared back at her, impersonal and precise, yet beneath them she sensed the echo of a boy's vow whispered under starlight. She imagined what the bakery could be: warm light on early mornings, shelves lined with loaves, her mother seated near the window smiling at the scent of fresh bread. The dream was within reach, but tethered to a history she could neither fully reject nor wholly accept. Before turning off the lamp, she wrote a note in her journal: "The past owes me nothing. But if I build again, it will be with open eyes." The words steadied her. Tomorrow she would visit potential storefronts, not as a server chasing fragments, but as a woman holding the keys to her own beginning. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds, casting slender bars of gold across the kitchen floor where Maya sat with a cup of cooling coffee. The documents lay open before her once again, their language clinical yet heavy with consequence. Every line spoke of restitution, of legacies and investments tied to names she once trusted, and to a man who had disappeared into silence for 12 years. She traced the embossed seal with her fingertip, wondering if redemption could ever be built on money. Her phone buzzed with a message from Adrian. "Meeting today at 2 to review the Harper District project. It could be good for your bakery plans. Hope you'll come." Maya hesitated. The Harper District had been a forgotten part of the city, its streets lined with shuttered shops and graffiti-streaked facades. Adrian's new development promised affordable housing and space for small businesses. Yet, beneath his vision she sensed the ambition of a man, still proving himself to ghosts. By noon she had made her decision. She dressed simply, navy slacks and a cream blouse, tying her hair back in a loose knot. As she caught her reflection in the mirror, she saw not the girl he once knew, but a woman tempered by time. She whispered to her reflection a quiet reminder. You go for truth, not closure. The offices of Blackwell Innovations gleamed like polished stone, their glass walls reflecting the skyline. A receptionist guided her through a hall lined with architectural renderings, sprawling communities, green roofs, tree-lined boulevards. Adrian awaited her in a conference room overlooking the river, sleeves rolled, tie loosened, a man caught between boardrooms and memories. I wasn't sure you'd come, he admitted, gesturing to the seat across from him. I need to understand, she replied. He clicked a remote, and the wall screen lit with images of the Harper District transformation, blueprints, digital models, and a section marked for community business grants. Here, he said, pointing, this block will host local entrepreneurs. I thought your bakery might fit here, alongside a cafe, a bookstore, a co-op market. Maya studied the plan. It was beautiful, hopeful even, but she heard her mother's warning echo in her mind. Blessings can bind, and what does this cost? She asked quietly. Nothing, Adrian answered. The trust is yours, independent of me. But I hoped you might see how our stories could converge again, not out of debt, but shared purpose. His sincerity stirred something inside her, yet caution anchored her words. You built this empire while chasing absolution. Are you sure you're not trying to rebuild what was lost, instead of accepting what is? Adrian's gaze drifted to the city beyond the glass. I've spent years constructing towers strong enough to silence my father's voice. But strength without grace becomes another prison. I'm trying to learn the difference. Before Maya could respond, a sharp knock broke the stillness. An assistant stepped in, whispering urgently. Adrian's jaw tightened. A break-in at the Boston site, second this month. No injuries, but sabotage suspected. Maya watched him absorb the news, the old armor slipping back into place. Control, command, action. He dismissed the assistant and turned to her. I'll need to fly out tonight. Trouble follows power, she murmured. Or perhaps power attracts unfinished wars, he replied, half smiling. But I'll return. We're not done. That evening, as dusk bled into the horizon, Maya walked the streets near the Harper District. Broken windows mirrored fragments of her face. She imagined the future he offered, flour-dusted counters, laughter spilling from open doors, her mother seated near the warmth of an oven. Yet shadows lingered in the corners, whispering of debts never fully paid. Back home, Ruth sat reading by the lamp. So, what did you learn? That some promises return wearing different clothes, Maya answered, and that forgiveness might be a blueprint still in draft. Her mother closed the book. Just remember, foundations built on secrets crack the hardest. Later, as Maya prepared for bed, her phone vibrated again, an unfamiliar sender. The subject froze her breath. The truth about Adrian Blackwell. Beneath it, a time and place, noon tomorrow, Crawford Building lobby, come alone. She read the message twice, unease curling through her chest. Who was reaching out from the shadows, and what truth could alter the story she thought she knew? In the silence of her room, the city's lights shimmered like unanswered questions across the glass. The next morning dawned pale and uncertain, a mist curling over the city as though the streets themselves held their breath. Maya barely slept, the anonymous email looping through her mind. The words were simple, yet weighted with danger. The truth about Adrian Blackwell. Come alone. She brewed coffee she didn't drink, staring through the kitchen window at the awakening skyline. Her mother's voice floated from the bedroom, soft but sharp with concern. You're thinking about going, aren't you? Maya turned, guilt etched across her face. I have to know, Mom. Ruth closed her eyes briefly. Then promise me you won't go alone. Maya hesitated before nodding. Of course. But as the morning unfolded, calls went unanswered, schedules conflicted, and by late morning, she found herself walking the marble floors of the Crawford Building alone, the echo of her footsteps louder than reason. The lobby shimmered with corporate polish, tall glass walls, a central fountain, sunlight spilling in thin gold ribbons. Professionals moved briskly around her, their lives unburdened by the secrets she carried. Miss Hayes. Maya turned. A woman in her 50s approached, her bearing elegant, her dark hair streaked with silver. Patricia Crawford extended a manicured hand. Thank you for coming. Maya shook it warily. You said you had something important to tell me. Patricia gestured toward the cafe across the atrium. Let's talk where we can be heard but not interrupted. Minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner, untouched coffees cooling between them. Patricia regarded Maya with an intensity that felt both maternal and strategic. You remind me of your father, she said at last. He had the same resolve when he stood against Gerald Blackwell. You knew my father? We were engaged once, Patricia replied evenly, until he met your mother and discovered love that couldn't be negotiated. Maya's breath caught. Then why contact me now? Because history is looping back, Patricia said, sliding a manila folder across the table. And you deserve to see the pattern before it traps you. Inside the folder lay newspaper clippings, photographs, and legal filings. Headlines leapt from the pages. Blackwell Innovations acquires Harper Design Group. Harper suicide shocks architectural world. Maya's stomach nodded. What is this? Patricia's voice was steady. A record of the path Adrian took to power. He tells stories of justice and vision, but he's left casualties behind. Thomas Harper was a gifted architect. After Adrian targeted his contracts and clients, Harper sold his firm for a fraction of its worth. Months later, he took his own life. Maya shook her head. You're accusing Adrian of causing a man's death. I'm accusing him of valuing conquest over compassion, Patricia corrected, and of obsession. His fixation on you has been whispered in boardrooms for years. Every acquisition tied to your past, every project echoing the dreams you once shared. That isn't love, Ms. Hayes, it's possession dressed as devotion. Maya pressed trembling fingers to her temples. Why are you warning me? Because I watched a similar story destroy generations of my family. Gerald Blackwell built empires by breaking people who stood in his way. His son learned too well. Maya searched Patricia's eyes, seeking malice, but finding only weary truth. And what do you gain by telling me this? Peace, Patricia answered quietly. Perhaps redemption, and maybe the hope that if you know the whole picture, you can choose differently. Her phone buzzed, a message from Adrian. Back in the city, need to see you, urgent. Patricia saw her reaction and sighed. He knows. He always knows. Be careful, Miss Hayes. When a man builds his life around a single promise, breaking it can shatter more than love. Maya left the cafe with the folder pressed against her chest like a fragile secret. Outside, sunlight fractured across the building's glass, reflecting her face a dozen times, each one shadowed by uncertainty. She walked for hours through streets both familiar and foreign, torn between the man who claimed to have built everything for her and the warnings of a stranger who spoke with the authority of history. By dusk, she sat at her kitchen table, spreading the clippings beneath the lamplight. Headlines of triumph and tragedy stared back like accusations. When her mother entered, Maya whispered, "What if everything he's done is because of me?" Ruth placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Then the question is not what he's done, but what you'll do now. Maya looked at the folder, then at the phone vibrating beside it, with another message from Adrian. She knew she could no longer delay the reckoning. The truth awaited, and it would demand more than forgiveness. It would demand choice. Evening cloaked the city. She opened the door to find Adrian standing there, the sharp lines of his suit softened by fatigue, his eyes carrying the weight of something long avoided. "You met with her, didn't you?" he said quietly. Maya stepped aside, motioning him in. "You already knew." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I saw you on the lobby cameras." Patricia has been waiting for her moment. She folded her arms. "And what moment is that exactly? To show me the trail of broken companies and lives left behind your empire." He winced at her words. "You read everything." "I did," she said. "And now I need to hear the truth from you, all of it. No defenses, no rehearsed speeches." Adrian sank into the nearest chair, his composure unraveling. "There's truth in what she told you," he began. "Thomas Harper was a casualty of my ambition. I convinced myself it was just business, competition, but I knew what I was doing. I wanted to crush anything that tied back to the Crawfords, to the life my father tried to force on me." Maya's voice was quiet, steady. "And did it help? Did destroying them make you free?" His eyes lifted to hers, haunted. Number. It only made the silence louder. After Harper's death, I saw what I had become. That's when I shifted the company's mission, started the foundation, redirected resources to rebuilding what I helped tear down. But redemption doesn't erase the past. She moved closer, her heart heavy, yet searching. Why not tell me all this before? Because I was afraid you'd see only the man my father raised, not the one I fought to become. Maya studied him, the layers of power and regret, the boy who once dreamed beside her, now a man who built fortresses from guilt. What about Patricia's warning, she asked, that your obsession with me isn't love but control? He shook his head slowly. I won't deny I thought of you constantly. Every success a step toward proving I could be the man worthy of you. But it wasn't control, Maya. It was the only thread of truth I had left. You reminded me there was once something pure before ambition poisoned it. She turned toward the table, her gaze landing on the folder. You can't rebuild the past, Adrian. Love isn't something earned through power or penance. It's chosen freely, and it lives only in truth. He rose, crossing the room until he stood before her, eyes searching hers. Then, choose now, he said softly. See me as I am, not as the boy who left or the man who conquered. Silence stretched between them, fragile yet alive. Maya's pulse echoed in her ears. I don't know if I can trust you, she admitted. The man you've become carries shadows I don't fully understand. Adrian nodded, accepting the weight of her doubt. Then, I'll wait, he said simply. I'll prove trust in deeds, not promises. Her mother's voice drifted from the hallway, calling softly. Maya turned as Ruth stepped into the light, leaning on her cane, her gaze calm yet discerning. So, the architect returns, she murmured. Adrian bowed his head slightly. Mrs. Hayes, I owe you an apology that words can't repay. Ruth studied him for a long moment. My husband once said love without courage is a cage. You've built towers, Mr. Blackwell. Make sure they hold more than regret. He met her eyes with quiet sincerity. I intend to. After Ruth retired to her room, Maya faced him again. The trust, the foundation, the bakery. They're all threads in a tapestry you're trying to mend. But I need time to decide if the pattern is one I can live with. He reached into his pocket, placing a small card on the table. My direct number. No assistance, no barriers. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here. As he turned to leave, she called softly, Adrian. He paused in the doorway. I'm not saying no, she said, her voice trembling. Just not yet. He smiled faintly, eyes glistening. Not yet is enough. Then he was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of rain and the echo of a promise reborn in uncertainty. The following weeks unfolded in quiet waves, each day marked by small decisions that carried the weight of larger ones. Maya balanced shifts at the restaurant with visits to realtors, scouting potential spaces for the bakery she had once abandoned. The trust funds sat untouched in a separate account, their existence both a promise and a question. Her mother's health improved slightly under a new treatment plan, the medication now affordable thanks to the first transfer from the investments Adrian had uncovered. Ruth spent her afternoons reading by the window, sunlight softening the lines of years spent in struggle. Sometimes, Maya caught her mother watching her with a look that blended pride and caution, as though she too sensed the delicate thread connecting their newfound stability to the man who had returned from the past. Adrian kept his distance, sending occasional updates about the Harper Foundation's first scholarship recipients and the restoration work beginning in the Harper district. Each message ended the same way. No expectations, just progress. Hope you're well. Maya read every one, but never replied. She needed to understand her own heart before inviting his back into it. Yet she found herself following news articles about Blackwell innovations, studying his interviews, searching his eyes for traces of the boy who once sketched dreams on napkins beside her. One evening, as autumn painted the skyline in hues of rust and gold, Maya stood outside a small storefront tucked between a florist and a used bookshop. The space was modest, but filled with potential. High ceilings, a wide front window, a faint scent of old wood that spoke of stories waiting to begin again. She could almost hear the hum of ovens, the laughter of customers, the heartbeat of something entirely her own. Later that night, she shared her discovery with Ruth. "It feels right," she said softly. "Not because of the money, but because I can finally see it clearly again." Ruth smiled. "Then build it, child. Let it be yours, no matter who helped light the way." Maya nodded, though uncertainty lingered. Could she truly build a future that honored her past without being bound by it? A week later, she stood at a long oak table in Adrian's office, blueprints spread before them. The bakery's layout nestled among community spaces, the air of the room thick with unspoken meaning. He watched her trace the design with her fingertips. "It suits you," he said quietly. "I'm not sure I suit the world you've built," she replied. His expression softened. "The world I built was meant to keep me safe, but safety isn't living. You taught me that once." Maya looked up, meeting his eyes. "Do you still believe everything can be fixed?" "No," he said, "but I believe everything can be faced." They reviewed floor plans and permits until dusk, conversation blending practicality with moments of fragile honesty. When she gathered her papers to leave, Adrian reached into a drawer and withdrew a small velvet box. "This isn't a proposal," he said quickly as she froze. "It's a keepsake." Inside, resting on satin, was a silver pendant shaped like an oak leaf. "The old tree by the lake," she whispered. He nodded. "The place where I made promises I failed to keep. This one isn't for the past. It's for the future you choose, whatever it is." Maya closed the box gently. "Thank you." Outside, the evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain and possibility. She walked slowly, the pendant heavy in her pocket, thinking of the boy who had vanished, the man who had returned, and the woman she was still becoming. That night, she dreamed of the lake again, of laughter, of sunlight through leaves, of hands intertwined with trust unspoken. When she woke, the memory no longer hurt. It simply was a chapter written, not erased. In the quiet that followed, Maya made a decision. Tomorrow she would sign the lease. Tomorrow she would call Adrian. Tomorrow she would stop measuring her life in what was lost and begin shaping it by what could still be found. 6 months later, the morning sun poured through the wide windows of the new bakery, washing the walls in soft gold. The scent of warm bread drifted through the air, mingling with laughter and the low hum of conversation. Maya stood near the counter, adjusting a vase of fresh flowers, her heart thrumming with disbelief and gratitude. What had once been a fragile dream scribbled in a notebook now pulsed with life all around her. Sweet Haven Bakery occupied the ground floor of a mixed-income building in the revitalized Harper district, its sign hand-painted, its shelves lined with loaves still dusted in flour. Outside, a ribbon fluttered in the breeze waiting to be cut. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, faces bright with curiosity and welcome. Behind her, Ruth arranged pastries with steady hands, her strength renewed by months of specialized care. She wore a new scarf the color of sunrise and smiled at her daughter with quiet pride. "You did it," she whispered. "You built it from the pieces they left behind." Maya pressed her mother's hand. "We built it," she said softly. The door chimed and Adrian stepped inside carrying a bouquet of wildflowers, the same kind he had once picked by the lake when they were 17. His eyes took in the room slowly, reverently, as though he feared breaking the spell. "It's perfect," he said. Maya smiled. "It's real. That's enough." Outside, the crowd stirred as the mayor arrived, photographers gathering. Maya felt a rush of nerves. This wasn't just her opening. It was the unveiling of a chapter stitched together by forgiveness and courage. Adrian handed her the bouquet. "You're ready," he said. Together, they stepped into the sunlight. Cameras flashed, voices rose, and for a heartbeat, Maya thought of all the turns that had brought her here. The silence of loss, the sting of betrayal, the long road back to herself. She spoke briefly to the gathered neighbors, her voice steady despite the tremor of emotion. "This bakery is more than bread," she said. "It's a place for second chances, for stories rewritten, for dreams delayed but not forgotten. Thank you for letting me be part of this community." Applause rose like a tide. She cut the ribbon, the scissors gleaming, and laughter spilled into the morning. Inside, customers filled the space. Children pressed faces against glass cases, and Ruth poured coffee with practiced grace. Later, when the crowd thinned, Maya and Adrian stood by the window, watching sunlight glint off the river beyond the buildings he had helped design. The Harper Foundation's banner hung across the street, announcing scholarships for young architects and grants for small businesses. "You've done more than build towers," she said quietly. "You've built bridges." He looked at her, his expression a mixture of humility and wonder. "Not alone, Maya. You reminded me what purpose looks like." She turned the small oak leaf pendant between her fingers. "For a long time I thought love had to be certain," she said. "Now I think it just has to be true." He reached for her hand, cautious, hopeful. "Then let it be true, one day at a time." Maya met his gaze, the weight of the past settling gently behind them. "I'm ready," she whispered. Week passed and the bakery flourished, a cornerstone of the neighborhood. Every morning began with the same ritual. Sunrise over the city, ovens warming, her mother humming softly, and Adrian arriving with coffee and plans for new community projects. Trust rebuilt itself in small gestures, in honesty, in work shared side by side. On the day the Harper Community Arts Center opened, Maya placed a framed photograph on the bakery wall beside another taken long ago. Two teenagers by a lake, arms around each other, faces bright with possibility. Beneath it, she added a plaque engraved with simple words, "Some promises take longer to keep." As evening settled, she locked the bakery door and turned toward the lights of the city, their reflection dancing in her eyes. The road behind her was scarred but whole, the path ahead open and luminous. In her heart, the echo of the old vow stirred not as a burden but as a beacon, guiding her forward into the promise of tomorrow.